This recording is for the Dixon Public Library's Oral History Project. My name's Paul Ferrell, and today, which is August 20th, 1998, I'm talking with Zanette Seifert, everybody says, but it should be Seifert, right?
Right.
And we're at Zanette's home right here in Dixon. And let's start by talking about some family history, whatever sort of family history you know. Do you know about your great-grandparents and grandparents and such?
I know of them, but I mean, it doesn't really affect me that much because since I didn't know them, I mean, that's that. My father's name was John Cecil Belden. My mother's name was Carrie McGrew. John Cecil Belden was born in Central City, Nebraska, and in 1891. And my mother, Carrie McGrew, was born in Flora, Illinois in 1901. And they were married in 1920 in Dixon. My father came to live with my aunt, my great aunt, his aunt, Cornelia, I can't think of it, Cornelia Belden Hoyt. And she was married to Hiram Hoyt, who was the Justice of Peace in Dixon. He came to live with them and did odd jobs. He worked at a, I don't know what you call it, a horse ranch or something south of town was one of the things he did. And he managed a Union Oil service station on North 1st Street where I think it was where the County Corporation Yard is now. And he also, during the Depression, he sold insurance. I think it was called Northern Life Insurance. Why that comes to my mind, I don't know. And he drove a gasoline truck, Western Oil. And let's see, where else did he work? Well, as time went on, he managed the Veterans Housing Project, which was at that time over on let's see, C Street and 4th and C. It's where the high school auditorium and parking lot is now. And after that, he had the Shell service station. Between he and Ty Thompson, they kept the Shell service station going on 1st and A Street. And my mom worked at she was a telephone operator. Then they got married in 1901. No, that's not right. 1920. She was born in 1901. And they got married in 1920, and I was born in 1923. She worked at the telephone company. She worked at the Nut Tree. She worked at Dixon Drug. It's hard going back in your memory trying to think of where people worked. Anyway, I mean, they got along well. And during the Depression, it was typically kind of hard because there was no money. I can remember eating catfish because that's what you did. You went out and caught catfish. And my mother baked cakes, and I delivered them in a little wagon I had. And so we see. Now this is what I mean about interviewing. I'm going off on a thing. And let's see where my father's father was Fred Belden, and at one time he lived in Dixon, but I don't know when he did that, when he lived here. But Cornelia Belden was his sister, and he was married to Grace Ella Little, who was my grandmother. And at one time they lived, I was born, I'll have to go back. I was born in 1923, South 3rd Street, 370 South 3rd Street, and at a little house in back of the larger house because Cornelia and Hiram lived in the big house in the front, and then there was a little cottage in the back, and I was born there. I was delivered by Dr. Florup, who lived 3 doors down from where we lived. And I have one brother who was born in 1930, And he was delivered by Dr. Flora. And where do I go from here? Help me.
Okay. Well, now, you were then a city kid, a town kid. You weren't out on a farm or a ranch
No,
like so many other people I've talked with.
Just city kid. Went to school. My first school was, well, we moved to Vacaville when I was, I don't know, before 5, but I started school in Vacaville when I was 5. And then we moved back to Dixon when my aunt died. My great aunt died. My Aunt Neil died, and I was 5 and a half. And my memory of that is I can remember her funeral and sitting in the car watching everybody else when they took the casket out, and I have vivid memory of that. And I don't think anybody can tell me what happened because they don't know that I remembered it. But that was my memory of my Aunt Neil going. She was a really neat lady, and I can remember driving over from Vacaville over to Dixon and coming to her house, and she always made donuts. And I can remember going out on the back step and waiting for this donut to cool off so I could eat it. But silly memories, but that's what I remember of her. My Uncle Hiram, I can remember him because at 5 and a half, we moved back to Dixon, and we came to live with him because he needed somebody to care for him. So my mother and dad and I moved back into his house. And of course, he was the master of the household, and we did whatever he wanted us to do. I mean, it wasn't too bad, but we always had to kind of watch what we were saying because he was a true Methodist. And I can remember my parents having poker parties on Saturday nights with the Hopkinses and Virgil and Laura Robin, and at that time the Picks, Frank and his wife. And every Saturday they would meet at somebody else's house. But I can remember my uncle, if they were playing with pennies or chips, if they had money on the table, they had to really scrape it off real fast because my uncle did not believe in gambling, so to speak. But it was fun. I mean, you know, kind of had little things happening. Went to school at, which is no longer there, is the grammar school on C Street, and all I did was just walk up 3rd Street, passing all these neat houses, which are mostly still standing. Do you want me to name names of the ones that I?
Sure do. Yeah.
Okay. Next, at the end of 3rd Street was C.A. Jacobs, who was the principal of the grammar school at that time, lived. He and his wife and his 3 sons. Then next door were the Horrigan family. Next door to that was the Morgan family. Then Dr. Florth, and then Jim Palmer. Across the street was Heine and Janet Robin. Then at the end of Broadway was Mrs. Cowden, Grandma Cowden, Jenny Cowden. Next door to that was Jerry Stearns, who was a policeman. And then a Mrs. Howard lived there, and a Mayhew family lived there on that street. And then the Lucas family lived on the corner with their family. That's Colleen and Jeanette and Royce. Across the street from them was Elsie and Ed Shaver, and in the corner was the Mrs. Peterson. But then that house was eventually torn down, and Bud and Di Rossi built a new home there. And then there was skip a couple little houses, and then there was a Mackenzie house on the corner and the Moss house, and then there was a house where the Dukes live, and I don't know which Duke it was. Monaghan's, Harris, Dietrich, Mrs. Bloom, Grady's, Schultze, Doyle House, Thompson, and I left a few houses out because I don't remember who they were, but I can remember walking this every single morning, every lunchtime, and every day after school.
Now tell me about school now.
School?
Grammar school first.
Grammar school was great.
Mm-hmm.
The school was fantastic. We had, it's no longer there, but it was, each room was separate, and there was an outside corridor around every room. And I remember it really good because we used to play jacks on this during the winter, when it was raining, and the cement was absolutely slick. It was just, but you couldn't walk on it too well because, I mean, you'd slip and slide. First grade teacher, I had a Miss Stevens, and I have to tell this. Reason I remember first grade, really dumb, I had a tooth that was loose. And I was playing with it, and it flipped out, went all the way across the room, and I had to get up and go get it. And if you don't think that's when I became the town clown, I guess, because everybody had this big ha-ha about that. That's what I remember about that. And we had a fountain, water fountain, that had a very large base, and everybody had a habit of pushing everybody down in that. And I can remember my cousin had her tooth broken because somebody pushed her head down and hit that. My memory there. As we got older, I had Miss Higgins as a teacher in 4th grade, and that was a great class. I remember that class where we used to do crafts and things like that. And Miss Canopy I had for 2 years, and it was the most horrible 2 years in school. 7th grade I had Mrs. Bierman, and 8th grade I had Mr. Jacobs. And as we got into the 7th grade, we would get to go to hear the standard symphony. We would all go down to the gym, and it was a radio broadcast, and we would sit there and listen to this radio broadcast. Why, I don't know, but anyway, we did. And when I was in 8th grade, I think I was in 8th grade, we walked over to the high school and sat on the balcony and listened to the radio again when King Edward abdicated the throne for Wallace Simpson. Mm-hmm. We listened to that, and the school was really great because, I mean, we had the gym, and then they did add on a kindergarten room because we used to have a kindergarten in the class. Well, it was a little house across the street where Main Prairie School is now, and then they added class on, and then they had manual training, I think they called it, there was a little room down in the basement. They had that.
And they had manual training in grammar school?
In grammar school, yeah. And I remember we used to have a little glee club, and we'd go down there to practice, and there was all these little saws and all that kind of stuff. I don't know what they did. What exactly
is manual training? It's
it was
building things.
Yeah, it was just
carpentry.
Yeah, little things. I mean,
now was that just for the boys?
I think so, because the girls never got to go there. We were really pokey when we went down there to see what was going on. And the playground equipment was bars, high and low bars, and teeter-totters. And I think there must have been a slide, but I don't really remember that. And as you got older, on the other side of the school, there were what they call strides. It was a large metal pole, and it's hard to. And there were chains that came down from the metal pole, and then there was a chain, kind of, I don't know how to describe it. A square, like you put your leg through it, and you go up and down on this stride. I don't know how they ever got anything like this in the school when I think back, because, I mean, then somebody would let go of these things, and then they'd go around by themselves, and I can't remember anybody ever getting hurt, but boy, now they wouldn't have that. Anyway, it was kind of fun.
Well, what did you kids do for fun when you weren't in school?
Played ball.
Play ball?
Played ball.
Uh-huh.
I lived down on South 3rd Street, and all that lived down there were boys, and except for the Lucas family, and once in a while the McKenzies would come down there. They had a couple girls.
You say ball, you mean baseball?
And we played baseball on vacant lots.
Uh-huh.
And across the street from my house was a large vacant lot, and then the Boy Scout had their little log cabin way in the back of that. But right now, let's see, what is it? It's part of the corporation yard, I guess, down there.
Now, the Boy Scouts had a log cabin.
Yeah, it was really great. My dad was a Boy Scout master also. And I can remember sitting on the curb waiting for all the boys to come out of their meeting. One of those things that we used to do. And later on, well, even then, I guess, there was another roadway alongside of that vacant lot that went out to the ball field, the softball field. We used to have softball games out there, and we had bleachers, and cars could drive in and park all the way around, and we passed the hat for no admission. We passed the hat to get money to pay for the balls and so forth. We had an announcer, and I played on a team that had, we wore shorts, real short shorts, and I played on a team that was sponsored by the Dixon Drug Company, and we played, I can remember Emma Delphus was on that team and her sister. We played Vacaville, Davis, Winters, one other town I don't remember.
Now, this was an all-girls baseball team.
Yeah, and we were older. I was in high school, and these other ladies, they were out of school. We just picked anybody who wanted to come out and play ball, come out and play ball.
This is the first I've heard of girls baseball. Everybody talks about the Royers and the...
Oh yeah, well no, this was softball, and we just had a real good time. And I can remember, gosh, I can't remember who else was on the team. Oh, the Ashbys, but they're gone. Yeah, Emma Delphus is still alive. But anyway, it was fun, and we just had a real good time.
Well, you mentioned radio. Radio, that's another kind of recreation, wasn't it?
Radio. That's all we used to have, was radio. I can remember going home from school at lunchtime, and we had a, wasn't a little portable radio, it was a, what do you call them? Oh, I can't even think of the word. Well, like a TV, except it was just radio. I mean, it wasn't a portable. It wasn't just a lone radio.
It was a big piece of furniture.
It was a console radio.
That's what they called it, a console?
Console. C-O-N-S-O-L-E. And I would go home. My mother would have my lunch ready. And I remember I walked all those blocks home from school, a lot of gabbing and everything else along the way. And I would go in and I would have my sandwich. I would go lie in front of the radio, eat my sandwich, and listen to My Gal Sunday and Marge or something. I mean, anyway, those serials that were on the radio, I can remember those too. Almost can tell you this tune, but it's way back. Let's see, and school. Oh, and at recess time, we just had dirt fields. We always played baseball. The boys played across the street over by the, where the main prairie is now. And I was always captain of the team. I got to choose my team because I was the biggest in the class and I played the best. So I got to choose the team. I was the captain. It was a fun time.
I guess big changes when high school started, right?
Yeah.
You had kids from other grammar schools all coming together to the high school?
No, to the high school, yeah, to the high school. But we were by ourselves in a grammar school. That's the first, when I was in 7th grade, it was the first time I ever heard Edward Seifert mentioned, was then. I did not know him before that. In our neighborhoods, we all had different neighborhoods, even though we were maybe only a couple blocks away. Everybody seemed to have a vacant lot that they could play in. And so that vacant lot was for just your neighborhood kids and whoever kind of wandered in, and either they were acceptable or not acceptable. It was like we had cliques, you know. So my husband Eddie only lived 4 blocks away from me. I didn't know him. And we were never allowed to play in their ball game. I mean, and their vacant lot was on South 2nd and Mays. My husband is driving my daughter to counseling. And so their baseball game was over there. So, but we were never invited to go over there. But there was Royers, and there was Russell Royer, and there was Ed Seifert, and there was Ted McGimpsey, and the Swayze brothers, and this whole group. They played there, but we weren't allowed. And usually they didn't let girls play, but they allowed me to play for some reason. But anyway, we all had good time. And I heard of Eddie Seifert when I was in 7th grade. Never knew who he was after that until I was a freshman in high school. And then we started going together. And
so what was high school like?
High school, good and bad time. It was a great school because, I mean, we had 2 stories to that school. Have you ever seen a picture of it?
I have. Beautiful school.
Beautiful school. Took them years, and took them months to knock it down. So the freshman year I went to that school. And the junior and senior year I was in what was the gym. It's no longer there. And they had put partitions up for classrooms so that we could go there.
While the school was being constructed?
While the school was being knocked down. It was still there. Well, I have to go back a little bit. During my grammar school years, I had a wonderful, wonderful friend called Leonard Ferguson. And you've probably heard of his name mentioned before. He used to live next door over here. But this was before I ever lived here. I used to go to the high school and clean erasers, and they had a vacuum that was the whole upper and lower floors, and the vacuum was like in the wall, and you'd take the top of it off, and then the vacuum. So every Saturday morning I would go over there and clean these erasers, and then in the summertime I would polish all of the trophies in the trophy cabinet and clean desks and do all of these different things. And I'd get, maybe he'd give me 10 cents an hour or something like that. Anyway, it wasn't very much, and I really didn't care because he was just a great friend. And so then when I came to high school, I mean, I knew the high school, and that high school also had a basement where we could play handball against the, I mean, this is a great big huge room, and we could play handball down there. It was a wonderful high school, but it wasn't earthquake proof, I guess is what they said. So a couple of times that I can remember, I remember one time I was in biology class, and we were supposed to bring a carrot to school because we were having open house. And I didn't bring the carrot to school, and so I was told that I had to stay and perform that night and show what by cutting and with frogs and so forth. And I had a previous engagement with my to-be husband, with Edward, and so I told Mrs. Bloom that I really didn't want to do this because I had a previous engagement. Didn't matter to her, and I said, well, I'm not coming. And so, yes, you are. Well, I was very kind of outspoken lady, and she chased me all the way down. I can remember all the way down to the girls' dressing room, which was on the lower floor. But you know what? I was there that night. I was showing people how you cut a carrot apart. That was just one of the things that happened. Oh, another time, when I was a freshman, I walked by from my dad's, where my dad had the service station. Next door was Party Market, And they always had outside, they had the potatoes and the garlic and the onions and everything in vegetable bins outside. And I just picked up a piece of garlic and walked to school with it. Well, when I got to school, I can remember Betty Mae Carpenter said, "What have you got there?" And she's just a little gal, and I said, "The garlic." And she says, "Oh, well, let me have it." And so she tore it all apart. She took it and spread it all over the desks and put it in the desk. And so what the teacher was Mrs. Humphrey, and she says, "Who brought the garlic to school?" I did. "Well, you can say after school, and you can write 'I love garlic' 500 times on the blackboard." I said, "Okay." So I did. And the whole class stayed and watched me do this and laughed and ha-ha'd and the whole bit. Now, those are the times that I really didn't care about high school too much. I mean, I brought it on myself, but at that time it wasn't too good. Other than that, high school was all right. We used to have watermelon feeds when we were freshmen. That was the beginning of school. We used to have a lot of noontime dances, teaching the boys how to dance. And
noontime dances to teach the boys how to dance.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, it worked.
The music was from the radio, I guess?
Yeah, I think so. I don't really remember. It must have been from the radio, or it must have been records. I can remember one, "I'm on a Seesaw" or something like that. But then Mrs. Bloom used to have her little group. She'd teach dancing too. And it was just so that the boys would start asking the girls at a dance to dance instead of the girls dancing with each other and so forth. I don't know if it really worked or not. But we used to have proms, and decorations were fantastic, and we'd have them. This was before before this gym was the school, and so this would be in my freshman year. But I can remember one they had decorations like a circus, and they would have booths all around. I mean, it was really done really well.
So it was a theme for the dance.
Yeah, and it was done at school. But now, of course, they go clear out of town and do their thing at costing $50 and $100 for things. You know, where before it was just a lot of fun.
Why did some of the dances outside of school were fundraising?
I'm sorry?
Some of the dances that weren't connected with the school were for fundraising for various organizations. Didn't the firemen have some?
I really don't remember, because all I would remember dancing was at Mayfair. They would have a dance, and always had a Christmas dance.
Oh, yeah.
Firemen always had a Christmas dance.
Oh, that's
I can remember that.
Uh-huh.
And they'd have that at the fairgrounds. My folks, when I was really little, I can remember going to Plainfield. It's between here and Woodland, and they would have dances. And I can remember they had benches around the building, and I would sleep on the benches, and then at midnight everybody would have brought sandwiches and things, and they would have a midnight supper. Remember that really well.
So you dance and then you eat at midnight?
Then they'd eat at midnight. Not me. I was little.
Hold on a minute. Let me turn this tape over. Okay. So let's see. We were talking about dances.
Dances.
Yeah.
Other than the noontime dance, a freshman reception. Always had a freshman reception. We had quite a few dances at high school.
Now sports at high school. Dixon had some pretty good sports
tennis.
Teams. You played tennis?
I played tennis.
I never heard much about tennis.
Freshman on.
Uh-huh.
And some of the tennis players were my cousin Dorothy Leathers. She was Dorothy Smith at the time. Virginia Alameda, who's now Virginia Cagle. And the McKenzie girls, who are both gone. I can't remember anybody else. We had a girls' team and a boys' team. And, of course, we didn't have a swimming pool. Tennis, and we had archery. We had softball. I think we had basketball, but it was so weird. I never wanted to play it because I didn't like the way it was run. I mean, they had 3 separate courts, and you stayed in your one court, I'm sorry, and 3 sections, and you stayed in your own section. I mean, you didn't have the run of the court at all.
So it was a zone defense.
Is that what it would be called? Whatever. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. My feeling was, and I told him so, if I want to play basketball, I want to go from one end to the other. I mean, I'm not going to do any standing in the middle and playing around in there, you know. So I was really out of that. The coach and I didn't get along too well. And I was in band. We had a great band. Merle Good was the teacher. We played at the at Treasure Island at the fair, either 1 or 2 times, and we did a lot of walking. Went to Vallejo a couple of times in a parade there. Then we had a Mr. McCall who had all of these fancy things that you do in band, like a counter march and all of that kind of stuff, you know. So it was a good band.
Did the band march here for the Mayfair?
Oh, sure. Oh, we always got first place.
You did?
Yeah,
of course.
We were good. We had capes, though. We had capes and we had hats. And somewhere there is a film, a true film of marching. Have you been told this?
I've been told this by somebody.
Mr.
The guy who ran the projector had it last, and I can't remember his name.
I don't think so. Ferrell?
Yeah.
No, Del Cruz has it. He bought the theater, and it was there. It was made by the Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. It was must have been made in 1939 or 40, because Bill Taylor, who was in my class, he was a drum major, and Betty Mae Gooden was the drum majorette, and the rest of the band. So it could have been 39 or 40 that it was made. So it would be really interesting to get this into the archives, but we've had no luck.
Important piece of film.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about the parade, and then tell me about the fair.
Parade was the big thing, and Mayfair was wonderful. We had horse races at that time. I don't know. I was just always really busy. I don't know. I can remember one time in the parade, and I can't remember. I must not have been marching in the parade, marching with a band, because one of my classmates, Eloise Green, and I decided that we wanted to be in the parade, and so we wanted to drive a horse and buggy. Then we went out west of town. I think the man's name was White, but anyway, we borrowed a buggy and a horse from him, drove it all the way back into town. Now this is before we had the overpass and all of that stuff, and before we had the highway through there. Back into town, freeway I mean. Where did we tether this thing? This must have been on the Saturday morning that we did this. And then we were in the parade, did fine. I had never driven a horse, whatever you call a horse before, never have since. And got through the parade all right, and then we didn't know what we were going to do, so we had to tie the horse up somewhere. And it was across the street from our house to an almond tree. Don't know what we did with the buggy. Anyway, all of a sudden, over a loudspeaker at the fair was my name. "Your horse is loose." And, you know, I have tried to think after that how we ever got this horse back out to where it came from, and I think I blacked it out. I mean, I think this is some part of my life I did not want to remember. I mean, it was very embarrassing. Now, enough of that.
Now, what about the fair? That was quite a thing, wasn't it? There were horse races and
we had the horse races.
Was a ball game? Was there a ball game out there?
I don't remember a ball game. I was too busy doing my own thing. I mean, after all, I had to keep track of Eddie and who was going to take me on the next ride and all of that.
So there were rides.
But there were rides, and there was a great flower show. Remember that? I truly don't remember anything else. I just remember the horse races. And for some reason, we could bet and everything. I mean, at least I did. Somebody may have taken my money and got up to the booth, but it was good. I was in the maypole dance. You know what a maypole dance is?
Somebody described it to me.
The pole
you wrap a ribbon or several
pole
ribbons.
And different ribbons coming down, and everybody held on to a ribbon. I can't remember how many were there. And you go in and out. And at that time, there were boys had one ribbon and girls had the other. And of course, the boys never wanted to be in it, so the girls took part of the boys. I was always a boy. And in and out. I think I was in that 2 or 3 years. Other than that, I don't know. Mayfair.
What about the other parade? I've heard a little bit about the Portuguese had a
Holy Ghost. Yeah, that was something else too. Never really participated in that except to go down and have their supa and their warm punch. But they would set it all up out on the some of the area is still there. It's up by where the offices are built now, where there's a big bunch of trees, and where the parking lot is behind the fence. And they'd set up all of the tables with butcher paper over the top of them, and they would have everything was free, and it was the meat and the French bread with the gravy, kind of little juice, au jus.
Now that's what sopa is. Sopa is meat and bread and.
It's what they pit roast the beef, and then it is just so tender it just falls apart. Now they just cook it. I mean, they have soup every year, and how do they do it? Oh, they had great big pans, very large pans, and put the meat in it, and then they'd have another large pan with the French bread with the juice over the top of that. And usually I think they served not spinach but chard, and that was it. And then they had this warm orange drink. And my husband's father had the bakery in Dixon, and he was the one that baked all the bread, hundreds of loaves of bread. Every year they put this on in August. They'd have the parade, and the girls were chosen from different towns, and they would have like a ring around them, and the little children would hold up this square velvet covered wood around the queen, and the queen and her aides would walk in the middle of this down from the church to the fairgrounds. I mean, it's a long walk in hot August weather, but they loved it. And they'd have these tremendous robes and the big crown on their head, the girls with the big crown on their head, and this velvet fur collared robe, and then their pretty dress. And that was but always a queen, but I never heard of a king.
Was there a Mayfair king? I never heard of that.
Mayfair king? No,
just
never.
a queen.
This is a queen. Queen for Mayfair and a queen for Holy Ghost. But it was a Portuguese celebration, and they still have it now. I mean, they have brought it back. For years they didn't have it, only because during the war they couldn't have it, and plus the fact that everybody's it doesn't have a dairy anymore. It doesn't have, they don't raise cattle, and it was hard to come by money to have this. So, but other than that, it was a fun time too. I mean, they had rides, carnival, and everything.
Well, now the Portuguese are, I guess they're one of the what you call ethnic group, along with the Germans. And what else? Is it basically just Germans and Portuguese? I guess, well, there's Irish, right?
Yeah, there's quite a few Irish, but I think it was mostly Portuguese, Swiss.
Swiss.
A lot of Swiss. Some Italians, but mostly Portuguese settled here, and they all had dairies.
Yeah. What about farming around here in Dixon? I know you're a city girl, but from what I understand, the Germans tended toward dry farming and Portuguese tended towards
dairy farming.
Dairy farming?
I don't know too much about it. All I know is that every school year when school was out, all the guys would go out and work in the hayfields and do their, baling and all of that kind of stuff. And it was mostly all done by hand. And I don't remember any tomatoes being grown or anything. It was mostly grain. My dad, I can remember him years before in sugar beets. I mean, there was a lot of sugar beets around here earlier in the 1900s. I mean, because my dad was, I can remember the knives they used to cut the sugar, because I used to go with them every place. I was not a little girl. I was like a tomboy. I mean, everywhere my dad went, I went. I was on the gas deliveries, and I was on the sugar beet. I was out fishing. I mean, whatever Dad did, I did. Mom was the neat Nick. I did not take after her.
Oh, the other thing I hear about as far as agriculture is sheep. This is a big sheep raising.
I didn't know anything about sheep. I used to think they were kind of cute. I honestly did not know anything about what didn't affect me. If it affected me, then I would know about it, but other than that,
Well, what about some of the businesses? You mentioned the Party Market. What else? What other businesses were here in Dixon?
Oh, well,
there were a few grocery stores, weren't there, besides Party?
Yeah, next door to me, during one period, there was a Mr. Barker. He had a grocery store. Some people remember Barker's as the great big store in the Grady building, but when I first knew him, he had a little grocery store, where the Bank of America, First Northern Bank has their parking lot now. That used to be all building, like I'm sure you've heard of the Opera House above it was below the Opera House.
No, I didn't hear anything about the Opera House.
You've not heard.
Tell me about the
Ardith
Opera
didn't
House.
tell you about the Opera House?
No,
Hey,
I'm sure she
we
didn't.
love that place. We all used to have ballet dancing and tap dancing and everything up above that. It was the whole block on B Street was building. There was the First National Bank at that time. There was the telephone office. There was Judge Severs's office. And I can't really remember, but up above, and then there was a grocery store, and up above that was the large building, and I, for the life of me, I don't know, like there's the Oddfellows building, and the Masonic Hall. Well, anyway, it was at one time, it was the Opera House, and we used to go there for dancing lessons and things like that when we were kids, young kids. And the telephone company was there. And anyway, Mr. Barker had the grocery store there, and I can't remember, Savings Market or something like that. And he had an opening, and I remember he asked me down, and I served little pieces of cheese to people. I mean, they had little samples of everything. And then he moved across the street many years later, and had the big savings center where where Grady's was Grady Building. It now houses. I've housed so many things. I think there's a dress shop in there now. Was a savings and loan, and now anyway. Then there was a red and white store, I think, on Main Street.
Oh, that's groceries.
On First Street.
Groceries, red and white?
Red and white groceries. Somebody said there was a Safeway store, and I can't remember a Safeway store.
Somebody mentioned that.
Yeah, I don't know where it was. Anyway, next to the there was a lot of restaurants. Greek had a restaurant there. Across the street, I used to work at the Giant Orange. Giant Orange. I made 33 1/3 cents an hour, and I have never worked so hard in my life, and never have worked so hard since then. We used to carry the garbage out. We used to carry 50 pounds of ice in and chop it all up, and real thin ice. And we used to scrub the big garbage cans. We used to rake the where the cars went in and out. It was all pea gravel, and we used to cut oranges till the oranges came out our ears, and squeezed oranges and made frozen orange juice. And I don't know how much we used to sell that glass, but I know they made a mint, but they sure didn't pay their help very much. And we worked, this was when the highway went on Adams Street, which is now Adams Street. This was the highway right through town from San Francisco to Sacramento. And we used to stay open until 10 o'clock. Sometimes on the weekend we'd stay there till 12. And we'd be busy the whole time, especially during the summer when it was so warm, because that's where people traveled, and they stopped to have orange juice. And I worked there. Well, I was still working there in 1942 when the war was declared. And then I went to work. I had already graduated and hadn't started school yet, and so then I went over and worked at the Dixon Creamery, which was right next to the Bank of America. Kind of hard to think where it was. Anyway, I worked there and I got 35 cents an hour, and it was just ice cream and lunches and coffee and soup, hot soup. Other than that, I didn't work anyplace else in town.
Now let's go back to your grammar school days. Now, when you were 10, 1933, they repealed Prohibition. Did you ever hear any stories or anything about Prohibition?
We didn't have anything in our house because we lived with my great uncle, and he was Justice of the Peace.
I got some good stories on some other tapes.
Oh yeah, I imagine.
But of course, you spent, and I'm sure you have some very good memories of Depression.
Just only the catfish I ate was mostly the
catfish. Now you caught the catfish out of the
Caught the catfish, brought them home in a gunny sack, put them out in the wash trays which was a little wash house out in the back of our house, and watched them swim around. And I would never touch them because I got poked with one of those things one time. And
those are hard to clean.
Yeah, so my dad could do all of that. Mm-hmm. We had rabbits. We went out jackrabbit hunting all the time, and we would eat those except during the summertime when they had boils. You couldn't eat the jackrabbits when they had boil. But then we started raising rabbits ourselves, but I never skinned one of those either. I could never quite do that. I could shoot them, but I couldn't skin them. And Eddie and I used to go out on Saturday mornings. He used to have a bread delivery to the migrant camps. I don't think they were called migrant camps at that time, but they were where the workers for the fields lived on the property of the owner of the fields. And he used to deliver bread to them, so he would pick me up on Saturday morning, unbeknownst to his father and mother, of course, And we would go, and I would take my .22 with me, and we'd shoot from the car. I mean, we'd shoot hawks, and we'd shoot crows, and we'd shoot rabbits, and all these things. This was our Saturday morning date. This was all during high school when we were going together. So we've been married 56 years. So, you know, our memories go way back. And yeah.
Well, now your father during the Depression, he had a service station, did he?
No, you know, I think he drove a gas truck at that time and sold insurance. Yeah.
But you managed to get by.
Managed to get by. Mom made cakes. Yeah, he was very active in Legion. We got one of those golden charter members or whatever they call them. And my mother was in auxiliary. Dad was in Masons and Royal Arch or whatever they call it. And Mom was Eastern Star. I wanted to become a Catholic a long time ago, but I didn't until Eddie and I got married because of my parents' association with the Masons and Eastern Star. I mean, and all of my mother's family was truly against Catholics. Don't ask me why, because none of them really had a religious affiliate, you know. But they didn't like Catholics, and so I just, because of my mom and dad, I just didn't become a Catholic, although I wanted to. So I waited.
Well, some of the things you mentioned there, the Masons, the Eastern Star, and then there are other, well, what am I talking about? I guess I'm talking about organizations that bring people together. There was a Women's Improvement Club.
Oh, yeah.
These things really...
Ladies' Aid.
Ladies' Aid, yeah.
Oh, there was a lot of them. Grange, which was the farmers group. What do I want to say? Golden State, something. Native Daughters.
Oh, Native Daughters of the Golden West.
Yeah, and Rebecca's, and Oddfellows. I don't know. We didn't. And as far as school activities, I don't think there was any PTA or anything like that. Of course, I mean, I wasn't married. I left Dixon the last of 1940 or 41, because I had graduated in 1940, and then I went half a year to postgraduate school, or whatever you want to call it, and before my college started. And then I went down to San Francisco and lived with my aunt down there, and went to what they call Lux Technical Institute, which we found out later that Dr. Knight's wife went there the same time. Anyway, she moved to Dixon and I moved to Alameda, and she was from Alameda and I was from Dixon. It was kind of a coincidence. And and then I don't remember. I remember there were when we would come home, we'd come home about every weekend after we got married. We got married in 1942, and they were still having air raids and sirens and all this, and the town would be blacked out and everything. And I know when I came home one time, I came home on the train. I can't remember whether I was married or not. I guess I was. Came home on the train. We used to have a Richfield station out on the highway at that time, not the freeway. And it had the big metal spire with a light, so the airplanes wouldn't hit it. I forget what you would call this.
I don't know. It was a flashing light.
Yeah, and you could always tell when you were on the train. You could see that, and you knew, well, I might as well stand up and get my stuff out and get ready to stop in Dixon. That's when the train stopped in Dixon. And I can remember coming home, and we'd have to have all the blinds down on the train so that they couldn't see that there was any lights on this, so that the bombs couldn't hit us or something. Anyway, so that was one thing I remember about the blackouts during the wartime.
Now, let's see. You mentioned a Dr. Flores, but from what I understand, there were several doctors in.
Yeah, there was Dr. Flores, Dr. Parsons, Dr. Stawley. Those are the only ones I remember. And Dr. Flores had his offices above where Barbara's dress shop was, where Tommy's beauty shop is now. There's an upstairs there, and that's where he had his offices. And the theater, we used to have a theater there. Eddie and I would go to the Dixon drugstore. We would meet there, and we would have a Coke, and we'd get our niblets. And
now, a drugstore was a different sort of thing than it is nowadays.
Oh, it was neat.
You had a
soda fountain.
Soda fountain.
Yeah, always had a soda fountain. And, yeah, little. It wasn't very big. But the soda fountain was there, and we'd always have a cherry Coke or cherry phosphate or lemon Coke or chocolate Coke or vanilla Coke. I mean, had all of these choices to get. And then for candy bars and stuff, we would take, oh gosh, what would we take? Licorice nibs or something they were called. And walnuttos. Yeah, it's kind of hard to remember all those things that are gone. No, never a chocolate bar. I mean, we never took those. Always something chewy.
Hold on a minute. Let me put a new tape in this machine. So, a pharmacy always had a. Let's see, Kirby's. Kirby's.
We had Kirby's and Milligan's.
Oh, I didn't realize there were two. And they both had these soda fountains inside?
I don't think Milligan's did. I can't remember it. It may have. I just never went in there too much.
Well, now you mentioned the train. I think just yesterday, Bud Rossi told me the train stopped 4 times in both directions.
I don't remember many times it stopped, but it was wonderful. And our train station was there at the end of B Street. And it was typical tan-colored with brown trimming, just like they still are, I think.
They're all the same everywhere.
And they had a waiting room with rounded seats. You know, I mean, they weren't straight seats. It was kind of at the where your legs went. It was kind of raised up a little bit. I mean, and they were wooden. Mm-hmm. And that was the waiting room. And then they had the ticket office and everything. And then Mr. Markham was the rail agent, or the manager anyway, and he lived up above the train station. He had an apartment up there. And it stopped, and you got on, and it went everywhere. I mean, you know, you didn't have to worry about any problems. I mean, it was good. It was a good transportation. And I don't know why they ever stopped.
Well, you said it was pretty good. I guess the roads were pretty bad. What were the roads like once you got out of Dixon?
Well, they were all very narrow, but so were the cars. I mean, the cars were what I remember. Our car was a Model A Ford, and I mean, it was not a wide car, you know, and then they still had Model Ts on there, because my dad used to have a Model T Ford, I mean, just for the service station to work from there. And I drove it around. There were quite a few Model Ts in town at that time. And I started driving when I was 13 years old, because my mom didn't drive, and I was a gopher for the service station. That's why I got my driver's license. I learned to drive on the golf course, which was in Dixon, where the city hall, right next to where the city hall is now, where the water company has their little place. There was a road back there. Of course, we still have the, what do I call it? The gully, the creek through there. And there was a little house where people could wash their golf balls. And my dad had that. They used to wear knickers. I remember that. And there was 8 holes. And Dad used to go out there with a big mowing machine and cut the weeds down and keep it up. And the greens were sand. And there was the oh, I keep calling it a gully, and I don't mean that. I don't. Anyway, there was always seemed to be water in it. We had pollywogs out there, and the kids go out there and build rafts. This was also ran through the Dixon High School property at that time too, before it was all covered up. And there was always a bridge over the top of it to go out to the football, from the high school to the football field. They had the bridge, and there was a bridge over in the golf course at that time. A lot of people played golf, a lot of men. Women didn't. I don't remember any women. But that's where I learned to drive, was to drive the car. I used to drive the car out there. And what else in Dixon do I remember?
Do you remember any big exciting events, fires or disasters or anything like that?
The only fire I really truly remember was when they but that was after we moved back to town, so I mean that wasn't early time. It was when the parish hall burnt down. But that was in that was in the 60s. Before that. No, all I remember is when schools were knocked down. We used to stand out in front of the grammar school. The bell would ring. I mean, there was a big bell, big bell. I mean, we rang it with a rope, you know. And so the bell would ring, and we'd all go and stand in front of the front of the school. The smaller grades. I don't know. Have you ever seen a picture of the school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the smaller grades would stand on the side, each side. And the older grades would stand right in the front, and we'd all stand in lines, and we'd salute the flag. And when we finished saluting the flag, we'd all march by twos into our classroom. And then I don't know what we did after we got in there. I know I can remember in 8th grade we used to sing "Here Comes the Flag" and several other. We always had singing on Friday afternoons. Friday afternoon. We had drawing sometimes, but we always had singing. We sang a lot.
Now, you mentioned, I think you said your mother worked with a phone company?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. She was a switchboard operator? Is that what she was?
Mm-hmm. It had little...
What was the phone like back in... What was the phones like in the 30s and the 20s?
Well, we had, at home, we had one on the wall. It was wooden, with the mouthpiece, and the receiver, the hook was on the side, and there was a little place in front that was kind of slanted that you could put your notepad on if you wanted to write anything on it. That was one of them. I have another one over here. It's a desk phone where it's...
I've seen that.
You've seen that?
Yeah,
okay.
Those are beautiful.
And...
Did you crank those phones? The ones that hang on the wall?
Yeah. The bell thing was on the side.
That's what rings your mother at the switchboard.
And then the switchboard, and then at the switchboard, when you rang in, there was a little brass thing that came down. It showed that was coming down. It didn't ring. It just, maybe there was a buzzer, but that little thing came down, and it showed. Then the hole was either up above. It must have been up above it. And then they had little plugs that they push into that hole, and then they could talk into their speaker that they had around their neck. Yeah. And when there was a fire, it would be right there. I mean, they would know where the fire was. I mean, and then their whole board would not light up, but would click or whatever, and everybody would be asking where the fire was, or where the ambulance was going, or whatever was happening. They would always call. That was the hub of activity. I mean, they would have the answers. Someone would call in and try to get, say Vernon Smizer. Well, Vernon would have called in and told the operator where he was going to be, but he only wanted calls from certain people. So the operator was his personal operator.
Screen the call.
Yeah. Yeah, and the operators, I mean, you know, they knew everything in town. I mean, they could tell you everything. But I can't remember my mom ever coming home and giving me any of these stories, you know. I just can't remember later on, you know, when we'd be talking, because I was the switchboard operator when I was in Oakland, and she would say, well, you know, do you ever listen in? And I said, no way. I mean, I don't. She says, well, we didn't either, you know, because, I mean, if anything came out about this, they would go back to the switchboard operator, the telephone operator, and say, did you pass this story around? And so they were pretty good about it.
A couple of people told me about outside of town, the party line.
Oh.
Everybody would listen in.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you could tell, too, you know. But I think most everybody had a party line, not only outside of town.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I can remember my Mrs. Morgan was on our line, and I could get her by ringing my phone a couple of times, and I could talk to her, you know, and she would, or whenever the phone rang, usually the other party picked it up. So you could, Celia, are you on there? But yeah, no, I mean, a lot of them are party lines.
Well, let's see, we talked about a lot of things.
Yeah, we sure have. I've been talking.
What else should we talk about? Anything we forgot to mention about good old Dixon?
Good old Dixon. Oh, I don't know.
Well, you'll probably think of something as soon as I turn
Well,
this stuff off.
as soon as you leave, I'll think of something. What have I got here?
Oh, you made a list.
Oh, we used to go swimming out in Pewter Creek.
Oh, yeah.
By Stevenson's Bridge. We went out there, and we had hot dog weenie roasts and stuff like that, and go swimming. Of course,
So that was your summer recreation.
Hmm?
Summer recreation.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have a pool. When we got a pool, we had a big celebration. When we got the swimming pool, the band came and played, and the whole bit. I remember that. Got pictures of that. And Doyle Dairy. Has anybody talked about Doyle Dairy? This used to be a summer thing. We who had bicycles did not drive. Doyle Lane is right one house down. That's Doyle Lane right out there. And we go all the way to the end of Doyle Lane, and there was Doyle Dairy out there. And they had a little room that was a cool room, and there would always be little half pints of milk in the box. And we'd go out there and sit under the tree and drink milk and come back, and just one of those things we did.
So the milk was free?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Little glass bottles, little half pint bottles. Yeah. A lot of us went out there, and of course I was on my bicycle 3/4 of the time. The other dairy was a friend of mine's dairy. Well, it was the Parkhurst Dairy, and it was over where Washington Street is now. And my friend Anita Cagle was the niece, and we'd go over there, and of course we were always barefooted in the summer. We seldom wore shoes, but they would never let us go on in the dairy with bare feet, because we might get a hookworm in our foot. Yeah, so which was good. And did a lot of bicycling. Did a lot of skating in the summer as we got older. Skate on the streets because there was no place else. Tennis court once in a while, but it was good. My life in Dixon was good. I never have any regrets about living anywhere else. We lived for 20 years in the Bay Area, and wasn't bad there either, but my youth in Dixon was good. This is why we wanted to come back to Dixon when our kids started to go to school. and we did.
Okay, well, I'm glad you told us all about Dixon.
Yeah, I have down here all these kind of different things.
Like what? What do you got?
Well, we did all of our cooking on a wood stove. In the summertime we had a kerosene stove. And
now why is that? In the summer kerosene, in the winter
because,
wood?
well, wood, when you have a wood stove, it's right, you know, in the middle of your dining room, your kitchen or whatever, and it's a little hot when you're starting a fire, because we didn't have any air conditioning.
Ah, I see. Kerosene.
So the
when you turn
kerosene
it
was
off,
always
you
on the
turn it
back
off.
porch, and it was, you know, just a little kerosene.
Outside, on the back porch.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
I see.
Yeah. And summertime, we had a sprinkler in the yard, and we played in that. And what else? Oh, I can remember cutting fruit. All the kids usually cut fruit in the summer.
Cut fruit.
Cut fruit. We'd go to Winters and cut apricots and cut. I was just talking to my husband the other day about that. I said, you know, the big 50-pound lug boxes. I can remember cutting this. You know, you cut it and you put it on a tray, and then they dry it.
Oh.
And as you're cutting the juice, you wore an apron. Rubber apron, which was hotter than H, and you put this on, and the juice that you're cutting these with would all roll down it, and had bare legs, and ended up with juice all over you, flies sticking to you, and I can't remember what we got, a nickel a box or something like that. Anyway, I'm thinking things that we did. You know, it's just like the guys in the field, you know, when they were working in the grain and stuff. I mean, they got nothing, and hotter than anything, and you're only getting paid, and now they have unions. They go on strike if you don't get a nickel raise and all of that. Kind of weird. My grandmother lived over on Fitch Street, which is now Jefferson, and we used to have really neat times over there. It was near the highway, so you know, had a little extra activity over there next to the highway. Can't think of anything else. Pewter Creek was wonderful.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn this thing off, but first I want to say thanks for taking time, sitting down and talking.
I didn't think I could talk that much, but I didn't, you know, when you start your memory going, it kind of...
It happens every time.
Yeah, it's great, huh?